What happens when a struggling photographer accidentally captures a millionaire senator committing cold-blooded murder? This wasn't just a birthday gig, it turned into a deadly secret. Now, he's running for his life, and the only person protecting him is the senator's own daughter. How long can he run before he's caught? How far is he willing to go to survive? And in the end, will anyone be able to save him? The Photographer's Secrets, Part 2. Dawn broke like a wound over the battered skyline. The sun didn't rise kindly that morning, it bled through the clouds, casting a sickly red over the abandoned church where Wisdom and Nora huddled in restless sleep. By the time the first rays kissed the cracked floors, Nora was already awake, packing the little they had into a small nylon bag she found buried behind the altar. Wisdom stood beside her. "Where now?" he croaked, voice thick with exhaustion. Nora didn't answer immediately. She tied the bag shut, straightened up, and fixed him with a look that was sharp, deliberate. "A Bodon," she said simply. "A Bodon. A man there. An old contact. He owes me a favor." She pulled the burner phone from her pocket. "But we have to move fast. Before they find this place." Wisdom nodded. It wasn't like he had options. "But we can't go about with the evidence in your hand, we need to hide it somewhere, we don't know what may befall us," Nora said. Wisdom thought about this for a while and he then brought out the flash from his bag, and he asked, "Where do you hide it?" "Here," Nora replied. She collected the flash from Wisdom, tied it in a nylon, dug the ground of the room with a sharp metal and she buried it there. Nora then turned to Wisdom. "I don't know why my instinct wants me to keep this here, but you've got to trust me on this one." Wisdom only nodded, without uttering a word. They made their way out of the bush paths as the city slowly stirred, roadside hawkers setting up tables of pure water sachets, pepper sellers shouting prices, buses belching black smoke into the sky. They melted into the chaos, two more shadows among thousands. At a dusty junction, they found a battered Peugeot 504 painted in the warm green of interstate taxis. The driver, an old man with missing teeth and eyes like burnt coals, barely glanced at them as they squeezed into the back seat. The car already held a young woman clutching a basket of tomatoes and a man in worn-out army fatigues reeking of cheap gin. Nora kept her head low. Wisdom stared out the window, heart hammering like a drum, waiting for the screech of tires, the bark of guns. But nothing came. Only the slow, tortuous crawl of traffic as they wound out of Lagos toward Ibadan, the ancient city of brown roofs and hidden secrets. Hours later, the Peugeot dropped them at a dusty corner near Mokola. The city was hotter here. Angrier. Even the air tasted of dust and betrayal. Nora led the way down narrow alleys, past crumbling houses and suspicious eyes peeking from darkened doorways. Finally, they stopped before a small bar, barely more than a shack, with plastic chairs scattered outside and the smell of stale beer thick in the air. The sign above the door read simply, "American Dreams," the paint peeling like dead skin. "Stay behind me," Nora murmured. Inside, the bar was darker, cooler. A battered ceiling fan struggled against the heat. A few men sat nursing bottles of Origin, their faces lined with old scars and older sins. At the far end of the room, behind a crooked counter, sat a man with silver hair and a missing ear. He looked up when they entered, and for a moment, a ghost of a smile flickered across his face. "Nora," he rasped. She nodded, tight-lipped. "Help us," she said. The man leaned back, studying them. His eyes, sharp, calculating, lingered on Wisdom for a moment too long. "Trouble. Big trouble." The man chuckled, a sound like gravel rolling in a tin can. "You always did bring storms with you, girl." He rose, grabbed the key from under the counter, and jerked his head toward a door at the back of the bar. "This way." The room he led them to was small, bare, but it had a bed, a fan, and, most importantly, a door that locked from the inside. As soon as the man left, Nora sagged against the wall, her strength visibly draining away. Wisdom sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her. "You trust him?" he asked quietly. Nora didn't answer. Didn't have to. Trust was a luxury they no longer believed in. Night came fast in Ibadan, heavy and sudden. Wisdom stood by the grimy window, watching the city breathe. He could hear the bar below them, the laughter, the fights, the drunken songs of men who had nothing left to lose. But under it all, he felt it, the tension. The city itself seemed to pulse with hidden violence. Suddenly, the burner phone buzzed on the bed. Nora snatched it up, her face hardening as she listened. Wisdom saw the blood drain from her cheeks. "What is it?" he demanded. She hung up slowly. "They found us," she whispered. Wisdom's heart stuttered. "How?" "You said." "I don't know," she snapped. Maybe the old man. Maybe someone outside. It doesn't matter." Her hands were shaking, but she forced them steady. "We have maybe 5 minutes." Wisdom's brain raced. "Run." "Where?" "Fight." "With what?" As if reading his mind, Nora crossed the room and pressed something into his hand. A small, cold pistol. Loaded. No words. Just eyes locking onto his, two broken souls sharing one terrible understanding. Tonight, someone would die. Maybe them. Maybe not. But the time for running was over. Outside, footsteps. Lots of them. Heavy. Deliberate. The hunters had come. Again. Only this time, Wisdom wasn't just running to survive. This time, he was ready to kill if he had to. He chambered around with a cold finality, feeling the heavy weight of it settle into his palm. Beside him, Nora pulled a second pistol from under her shirt. She gave him a small, savage smile. "Stay close," she said. Then the door exploded inward. And hell followed. The door splintered with a deafening crack, the wood disintegrating into jagged pieces. The first man entered, moving like a predator, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Wisdom and Nora. Two more followed, their faces hidden behind black masks, ice cold as death itself. They were armed, but that was nothing new. Wisdom had known this moment would come. Nora didn't hesitate. Her gun was already in her hand, her finger on the trigger, ready to kill. The first man, the one who had kicked the door down, lunged forward, but Nora's shot rang out before he could make a move. He crumpled to the floor, his body convulsing violently before falling still, blood pooling around him. The second man hesitated, and that was enough. Wisdom's instincts kicked in. The gun he held felt like an extension of his own body. He aimed for the second attacker's chest, the shot so precise it left no room for error. The man dropped to the ground with a wet thud, his weapon slipping from his hand as his body hit the floor. The third man, the one closest to the door, hesitated. There was fear in his eyes. Fear of the two of them. He raised his weapon, but Nora was faster. Before he could get a single shot off, she aimed, her expression cold and determined, and fired. He staggered back, his chest splattered with blood. He took a step forward, eyes wide, trying to reach for his gun, but it was too late. He collapsed face first, his body twitching in its final moments. The room fell silent, except for the heavy sound of their breathing, the faint hum of the ceiling fan above them. Wisdom's hands were steady as he lowered his gun. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. This wasn't the first time he had killed to survive, but with Nora at his side, it felt different. They were no longer just surviving. They were fighting. They were not the hunted anymore. Nora crossed the room quickly, checking the bodies with practiced precision. She was sharp, every move calculated. She had done this before. Wisdom could see it in her eyes, the same cold resolve he had seen in his own when life had forced him to face the darkest parts of himself. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, blood, and the haunting realization that they were only just beginning. Nora wiped her gun with the edge of her shirt, then holstered it. She turned to Wisdom, her eyes intense but unreadable. "Now we go," she said. "We can't stay here." Wisdom nodded, not saying a word. They had no time to mourn the dead. There was no time for weakness. They grabbed their bags, making sure to leave no trace behind. The room was already too quiet, too still. But the quiet wasn't the worst part. It was the knowledge that whoever had sent these men after them wasn't going to stop. They would keep coming until they were either dead or caught. Nora led the way out, her steps quick but silent. Wisdom followed closely behind her, his heart still racing. As they stepped into the night, the streets of Ibadan felt like an entirely different world. The city, once filled with the heat of the day, now felt cold and oppressive. The moon hung like a pale ghost in the sky, casting long shadows over the narrow alleys they passed. They moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows, avoiding the streets where eyes might be watching. Nora's phone buzzed again, a small vibration against her leg. She glanced at the screen, then cursed under her breath. "They know," she said softly, her face pale under the moonlight. Wisdom's pulse quickened. "Who knows?" Nora didn't answer immediately. Instead, she dialed a number on her phone, pressing it to her ear. The conversation was brief, one-sided. Wisdom couldn't make out the words, but he could tell by the look on her face that things were getting worse. When she hung up, she turned to him. "They are coming for us, Wisdom. The men we killed were just the beginning." Wisdom felt a chill run through him. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him, threatening to crush everything he had built, everything he had hoped for. But there was no time for fear. There was no time to feel sorry for himself. He had come too far. He would survive. They would survive. But only if they kept moving. The night was an endless blur as they made their way across Ibadan, trying to stay ahead of the people hunting them. At every turn, at every corner, it felt as though the walls were closing in. Every sound, every shadow, every person they passed made their skin crawl. Eventually, they arrived at an old warehouse on the edge of the city. The kind of place you didn't look twice at, dark, empty, forgotten. Nora stopped in front of the rusted metal door, taking a deep breath. "We'll lay low here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Until we can figure out our next move." Wisdom nodded, following her inside. The warehouse was as empty as it seemed from the outside. There were a few crates stacked in the corners, dust-covered and abandoned, but otherwise, it was just a hollow space. They sat in silence, their backs against the cold concrete walls, as they tried to make sense of the chaos around them. Nora finally broke the silence. "I never thought it would come to this," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with regret. Wisdom turned to her, eyes softening for the first time that night. "It doesn't matter how it started. What matters is how we finish it." Nora met his gaze, her lips trembling slightly as she exhaled. "I don't know if I can do this, Wisdom. Feels as if I'm betraying my people, my dad precisely." The vulnerability in her voice struck him like a punch. For the first time, he saw the cracks in her hard exterior, the fear, the exhaustion, the woman who was just as broken as he was. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly. "I've seen it. You've survived worse and yes, you're doing the right thing. Maybe I never had the chance to say this, I've always loved you, but I just felt you wouldn't wanna be with a common photographer." Nora closed her eyes, letting his words settle inside her, with tears going down her cheeks. And for a moment, in the midst of all the darkness, it felt like there was a flicker of light. They weren't alone in this anymore. The quiet of the warehouse was shattered when Nora's phone buzzed again, vibrating across the floor. This time, there was no hesitation. She picked it up immediately. The voice on the other end was gruff, urgent. "We don't have much time," the voice said. "The senator's people know where you are. They are closing in. You have to leave. Now." Nora's face went pale. Wisdom's heart stopped. They were running out of time. Nora had a past, one deeply rooted in her childhood in Benin. There were friends she hadn't seen in years, people who had shaped her early life before the move to Lagos. Chief among them was Kinto, the boy who had been her closest companion. They had shared laughter, tears, and secrets, but life had separated them. Still, she remembered him vividly, his loyalty, his street smarts, and his unfailing readiness to help. Turning to Wisdom, she spoke firmly, "We are going to Benin. I have no other choice. I have people there. Benin. Wisdom asked, surprised. Yes, she said. It's the only way. When Nora and Wisdom arrived in Benin, it took only minutes before she recognized Kinto. He was walking out of a familiar alley, just as he used to when they were kids. Her heart leaped, and she waved him over. Despite the years, it felt like no time had passed. Kinto froze for a second, squinting. Then his face lit up. Nora, he said, disbelief in his voice. Is that really you? Yes, Kinto. It's me. Relief and uncertainty flooded her voice. I need your help. He looked her over carefully, noting the worry etched into her features. Help, he raised an eyebrow. After all these years, you come to me for help. Nora nodded steadily. I don't have a choice. I've messed up. Now the man I love is in danger. My father's enemy is hunting him, and I have to stop it. Kinto crossed his arms, his expression tightening. I don't get it. You were always loyal to your family. Why betray your father now? Nora's throat tightened. I'm not betraying him. But I'm not letting an innocent man die either. I gave Wisdom the job that started all of this. It's my fault, and I have to fix it. For a long moment, Kinto said nothing. Then he sighed deeply. Let's go to my place first. You'll both be safe there. At Kinto's house, the air was thick with nostalgia and quiet excitement. A few of their old friends were already there, faces Nora hadn't seen in years, but immediately recognized. They greeted her with wide smiles and heartfelt hugs, remembering the kindness she had shown them back when she lived in Benin, giving them money, food, even clothes from her wealthy home. For a few precious moments, laughter and old memories filled the room. But the urgency of the situation soon pulled them back to reality. Kinto stood up, clearing his throat. If you want to win this battle, he said, voice steady and serious, you have to use your father's enemies against him. You can't beat the senator head-on. He's too powerful. Nora leaned forward, her brow furrowed. What exactly are you suggesting? Kinto lowered his voice. You need to reach out to his political rival, Senator Jackson. He's not exactly your father's enemy, but he's always stood against your father's evil ways. I remember how badly your father had Jackson during the last elections. That man has been waiting for an opportunity like this. Nora exchanged a quick glance with Wisdom. But will he even listen to us? She asked, doubt creeping into her voice. Kinto gave a half-smile. Convince him. You're his best chance at exposing your father's crimes. And trust me, Jackson has connections, powerful ones. If anyone can help you take the senator down, it's him. Nora nodded slowly. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was all they had. The next morning, they set out. Nora, Wisdom, Kinto, and a few trusted friends boarded an old van and made the long journey back to Lagos. Every mile felt heavier, the weight of their mission pressing harder against them. By evening, they arrived at Senator Jackson's heavily guarded compound. Gaining an audience wasn't easy. His security team was suspicious, and it took long, tense minutes of explaining before they were even allowed to see him. Inside, Senator Jackson regarded Nora with sharp, mistrustful eyes. This could be a trap, he said bluntly. How do I know you're not here to set me up? Nora swallowed, willing herself to stay calm. I'm not here to trap you, she said, her voice strong. I'm here because we have a common enemy. My father, the senator, he's gone too far. Together, we can stop him. For a long moment, Jackson said nothing, weighing her words carefully. Then, finally, he nodded. I'll help you, he said. But it won't be easy. Relief washed over Nora. They began making quick arrangements, planning how to expose the senator's crimes, gathering the evidence, mobilizing Jackson's powerful allies. But before they could act, disaster struck. One of the senator's spies had tracked them down. Word of their meeting had leaked. In the dead of night, a convoy of armed men loyal to the senator stormed Jackson's compound. Gunfire erupted. Chaos filled the air. Despite their best efforts to resist, Nora and Wisdom were overwhelmed, captured, and dragged away into the darkness. Kinto and the others managed to escape, but for Nora and Wisdom, the nightmare had only just begun. The senator was livid. Disappointment and anger burned in his eyes as he stared at his daughter, now locked in a room, and Wisdom, beaten and bruised in another. His trust in Nora had been shattered. She had defied him, and now, she was paying the price. As for Wisdom, the senator showed no mercy. After enduring hours of brutal questioning, Wisdom, barely able to speak, finally confessed where the flash drive was hidden. "It's buried at the church altar on the outskirts of Lagos," he muttered. Wasting no time, the senator ordered his men to take Wisdom there immediately and retrieve the flash drive that had caused all this chaos. Meanwhile, news of Wisdom's capture spread across Lagos like wildfire. Whispers filled the streets. The prominent photographer had been captured and was facing certain death. James, who had long been an ally, rallied some men and they stormed the senator's compound, but the senator had already fled with Wisdom and his men to get the flash drive. A fierce battle broke out, lives were lost in the firefight, but amidst the chaos, Nora was freed. Being that the attack took place at Senator Jackson's residence, he alerted the federal police. Forces quickly descended upon the senator's building. At the same time, Kinto, answering Nora's desperate call for help, summoned his boys from Benin. Nora, thinking quickly, realized where Wisdom was being taken. "The church," she said, urgency sharpening her voice. "That's where the drive is, that's where they'll kill him." With no time to waste, they all agreed they had to intercept them. Together, federal police, Kinto's men, James, and Nora, they raced toward the church. The early morning sun barely broke through the thick clouds as the senator's convoy arrived at the crumbling church. Wisdom's face was battered and pale, and his mind was foggy. He struggled to remember the exact spot where he had hidden the drive. Time became the enemy. Hands clawed at the earth, nerves frayed, and every second dragged like an eternity. Wisdom tried playing smart to buy himself some time to see if at all help might come, but the more he delayed, the more beatings. The senator threatened to kill him even without the evidence. Wisdom, weak and stressed, replied saying, "I might be killed by you or set free by fate." The senator laughed, replying to him, "No one knows we are here." The senator's cold heart showed no mercy. He ordered that they beat him the more. After a while, Wisdom gave up and finally, buried deep beneath the altar, they unearthed the flash drive. Now, with the drive in the senator's hand, one of his men pointed a gun at Wisdom and ordered him to kneel. "Pray your last prayer," he said, voice devoid of emotion. Wisdom's heart pounded, but strangely, his mind was calm. He closed his eyes, ready to face death. And he murmured, "Dear Lord, let heaven's gates be opened for my homecoming, for I fought with all of my might and this is the end." He wept and got on his knees. The man cocked the gun. A shot rang out, but it wasn't the senator's man. One of the senator's guards dropped to the ground. Chaos erupted as federal police swarmed the church, weapons drawn. The standoff ended almost instantly. Wisdom was rescued, and Senator Fadeyi, along with his son Festus and their men, was taken into custody. Outside the church, the scene was thick with dust and tension. Senator Fadeyi, shackled and disgraced, met Nora's tearful gaze. Kinto and his boys stood nearby. James and the federal police surrounded them. The senator sneered bitterly at his daughter. "You chose a stranger over your own blood," he spat. Nora, voice shaking but strong, replied, "I chose love and justice over wickedness and partiality." She sobbed as Wisdom, alive and free, pulled her into a hug. James smiled through his exhaustion. Victory, hard won and bloody, was theirs. The senator then turned to Wisdom saying, "You are just too lucky. Who are you?" Wisdom, with a bruised face standing and James beside Nora, replied saying, "Grace has been with me from onset, not luck. I am Livingstone, the only surviving child in my household. I am the survivor." Back in Lagos, the city seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. The streets buzzed with a cautious joy. People whispered the story of how a young woman and a photographer had brought a powerful man to justice. As Nora and James watched Wisdom, safe at last, they could hardly believe the ordeal was over. The road back to Lagos was filled with laughter, tears, and a deep, exhausted peace. In the months that followed, Wisdom rebuilt his life. He opened a vibrant photography studio in the heart of Lagos, named it Livingstone's Imagery. Quickly it became one of the most sought-after names in the city. And in time, Wisdom and Nora found their way back to each other, no longer burdened by fear, only by the fullness of love. They married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends, and together, they lived a life stitched with love, peace, and hard-earned joy. Now, let's hear from you, our cherished viewers. Would you say James is a good apprentice? Remember, B was lazy that he didn't check the footage well, and also remember he recruited men to save his boss, Wisdom. So what's your talk about James? Let's talk about Nora. Did Nora do the right thing by trying to save Wisdom? Was it just for her own interest of love, or she really wanted to fight against injustice and partiality? And like Nora, would you betray your family to stand by the man you love and to reveal the truth, knowing it would cost your father his life? Would you even call that betrayal? Do women like Nora still exist, brave enough to stand for love and truth even against family? Would you say senators like Senator Fadeyi _ men who rule with an iron fist and disregard the truth, do they still exist in our world today? Would you call him a good father and a good leader too? Now let's talk about friends like King To. What have you learned from people like King To? And finally, let's talk about Wisdom Livingstone. If you were Wisdom Livingstone in such a situation, what would you have done? Would you say Wisdom is a very strong and smart fellow? Was he careless to might have given the footage to James to edit? Above all, what lesson have you learned from the story? We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know your thoughts. Which part of this story moved you the most? If you found this story compelling, inspiring, or even thought-provoking, please don't forget to subscribe to Survivor's Tales. Your support helps us grow and motivates us to bring you even more powerful stories, stories of survival, truth, and courage. Let's keep telling these stories together. Subscribe now. Share the story. And thank you for being part of the Survivor's Tales community.